Alexandra Beller. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Excellent. I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story with the creative community.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let me give the audience a brief introduction for you, and then we'll jump into the conversation. You're an artistic director and visionary of the Alexandra Beller Dances, which has been operating since 2002, a hub for dance theater, community building, education, and creative growth. You have a prominent performance background as a principal member of the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Dance Company from 1995 to 2001. You've toured internationally, performing across the U.S. in over 50 countries. You're an award winning choreographer, and you choreographed and acclaimed theatrical productions such as Sense and Sensibility, earning a Lucille Lortel nomination and a Helen Hayes Award for Outstanding Choreography, as well as a IRNE nomination. You're a respected educator and mentor. As a former faculty at Princeton University, you've taught at institutions including the Laban Institute for Movement Studies, the HB Studios, and across universities nationwide and internationally. And you're also an author and scholar with upcoming publications that include The Embodied Conductor, a somatic approach to conducting with Laban and Bartiev, which is supposed to be published in December of this year. And then The Anatomy of Art, Unlocking the Creative Process for Theater and Dance, which is to launch next May of 2026. That is quite a repertoire
Mm.
of experience
Yeah,
in the dance world.
it's tiring listening to it. I'm like, oh, vacation.
Just draining to begin with. So, like I mentioned, I really only have one structured question, and it always starts off the conversation. And that is, where were you born, and what was life like as a kid for Alexandra?
I was born, well, technically born in Ohio, but I really grew up in New York from when I was 1.5, and my parents were in Ohio as an anomaly. So
Okay,
my family is all from New York, and I essentially grew up in New York. I was born for that very moment in November in Ohio. But I grew up in Queens, and it was like urban Pippi Longstockings.
okay,
I was alone a lot. I had a lot of fantasy life and a lot of invention, and I was an only child, but I was also like physically alone in a house a lot, and in some ways lonely, and in some ways not. And then I think I found in dance a way to have both community and visibility and expression and a lot of things I was craving at a deep level. And so dance became just a very central focus of my life at a fairly early age in a very impassioned way.
okay, okay. Were your parents in the creative fields at all, or what type of work did they do?
My father was a Shakespearean scholar who then became more of a like development director. He worked for the Brooklyn Museum and a symphony. So he was tangentially in the arts and
Okay,
definitely like deeply literate.
gotcha.
My mother had been a dancer before I was born, but was no longer and is a psychologist,
Oh,
um,
wow. Okay,
but also cooks and designs. And so there was definitely a lot of creativity, progressive politics.
expanded thought.
Yeah,
Got it, got
yeah.
it. How about grandparents? Did you have an opportunity to be around your grandparents much as a kid?
Really, no, none of them really. A little bit my mom's, but yeah, they were not especially interested in grandkids.
Okay, interesting. With being in elementary school, did you find that kind of similarly the same type of situation as being at home, where you felt a bit alone? Were you the type of kid who was rather in the back of the room, wanting to just hide in the corner, kind of a thing, be unseen versus an outgoing kid?
I would say somewhere else on that scale. Like neither of those exactly.
Okay.
I feel like I very much wanted to be seen, but I wanted to be seen as I was, and that didn't really feel like the system was not shining light on me as I was.
Uh,
So I don't feel like I fit into the way that they wanted you to be. So I didn't get seen in that positive light
yeah.
from that perspective. And I really wasn't that interested in conforming to that. So I like didn't get seen in that way. And then every once in a while, a teacher would see me what felt like accurately. Like they would see something unique about me and they'd be like, this. And like in sixth grade, I had an English teacher who was like, your writing is so special. And she just like reflected back this sense of having seen something in particular in me that felt true to me. And
Yeah.
that was really what I was craving, but I didn't get much of it. I didn't get almost any of it in elementary school except for that one teacher. And then I didn't get any of it in junior high school, middle school. And then in high school, I got a little bit of it. It was always in English. It was always English teachers in
Okay.
academic. And then I got a lot of it in dance.
Got you. Got you. Was it easy for you to make friends, or did you have some special friends at that age? Or,
I was that classic introvert where I had one really good friend.
okay.
And I pretty much always was lucky enough to have a best friend
Yeah.
and pretty much no other friends all the way through the end of high school. And then in college, I learned how to make more than one friend at a time
All
and
right.
have had, a really nice community of friends ever since then. Still small. I'm still one of those like, I don't like small talk. I don't like parties. I don't like big social circles. I want to have really deep, passionate, intimate conversations with one person that I feel really connected and aligned with. And I like to be friends with people who will also like call me out on my shit and challenge me and,
Okay.
tell me, remind me of things I'm not seeing, not just prop me up and agree with me. And I'm lucky enough to have some like really intelligent, wise friends right now. But I would say growing up, one friend at a time, but I was always lucky enough to have one.
Okay. Excellent. Would you say that you were a pretty sensitive kid?
Yeah, highly sensitive. I did.
Highly sensitive. Okay. Yeah.
Very,
Able to pick up on a lot of things that everybody else wasn't necessarily trying to put in front of you.
yes. And also like high feeling, like highly sensitive, highly empathic, highly observant, but also highly sensitized and highly feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Understand that intrinsically. Know exactly what that's like. How early did your parents put you into dance?
It was really my choice. I don't feel like I ever got put into anything, but when I was 8, I went to a day camp, like an arts day camp called
Okay.
Use Dan. It's out on Long Island. And you chose a major and a minor, and your major you did for 2 hours a day, and your minor you did for 1 hour a day. And then other than that, you had, regular camp kind of stuff,
Okay.
arts and crafts and sports and lunch and whatever. But it was an arts camp. So you did 3 hours of some kind of art every day. And my first year there, I was 8. I chose painting as my major and dance as my minor. Just, oh, I'll try that. Stepped into that dance class and like that was it. The next summer I went, dance was my major, I think, and my minor. And then I never stopped dancing after that.
Wow. Wow. Did the painting allow you to express some things in a way that seemed comfortable for you, or was dance more the way that you were able to express what you were feeling?
I enjoyed the visual art and I did it for a while as a younger teen, 12, 13. But I never studied it to the degree that my like skill, technique, virtuosity really allowed me to feel fluid.
Okay.
And I don't think it excited me enough to put that work in the way it did with dance.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind like practicing something over and over and over again and doing the same thing every day with my body, but I just didn't have that same kind of drive or enthusiasm for visual art. So I felt like I never got good enough to feel like I was really expressing myself.
Yeah.
And then I eventually mostly dropped it. I still draw a little bit every once in a while, mostly therapeutically. Like if something happens and I'm like in some process with something and an image comes to me, I'll try to draw it just so that I can have a little distance and see it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, visual art left my life in that way when I was about 13, although I'm a obviously highly visual person. I'm a choreographer.
Yeah.
And also just like my living environment has always been really important to me. So I'm always very mindful about decorating and things like that. Like I want to see beautiful things and curate them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a key point for creatives who are sensitive as well. I think most are, but some are, they have a little bit more confidence than others and may not sense as much. But those of us that are super sensitive, we're attracted to the beautiful things, want those things around us, want to be visually stimulated as much as we want that comfort of our own space. Was your mom seeing the dancer in you as you started doing these things with the camp based on her experience with dance?
Yeah, I think it was complicated with her and dance. I do feel like she definitely saw that I had something special. I think she definitely recognized how meaningful it was to me and definitely committed to making space for that and opportunity for that, even though we didn't have a ton of money. So I do feel like she supported it from that perspective quite a lot. When I wanted to go major in dance in college, she definitely took more issue with it because mostly because she was felt fairly certain, which was a reasonable assumption at the time, that I was not going to have a career in dance because I had a non-conforming body type. I was bigger than any of the
Okay,
dancers that were in professional dance companies. Like there was no woman that looked like me in any professional dance company anywhere in the world that I know of, at least
gotcha.
in the forms of dance I was doing. So it was a reasonable assumption on her part that I wasn't gonna be able to have a career, and so that majoring in dance was going to be a fairly wasted degree, and I should get a degree in something that was going to yield more of an opportunity for me.
Okay,
And that being said, she still paid for college, and I majored in dance. So ultimately, she did let me make the decision, even though she was worried about it and expressed her concerns about it. She still paid for half of college, and I majored in dance and got a BFA.
okay. Did you get any opportunities through junior high and high school to where maybe some others outside of the school recognized your dance talents as well?
Yeah, that's the only place anything got recognized was outside of school, pretty much. I jumped from dance genre to dance genre, trying to find a place where people were really excited about me and saw me. And I had started in some more classical forms, which with my body type was not going to be a good fit because they really just had, it was too much of a struggle for them to think outside the box. So
Sure.
I was at the Graham School, Martha Graham, pioneer in classical modern dance. And then I was at the Joffrey, which is a major ballet studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
And both of them were just like too entrenched to open up to the like what I was.
Yeah.
And I think I was like a very special. I mean, I look back on videos and I'm like, I just objectively could see that something was happening in me as a teenager, as a teenage dancer. I was just like, that's not a 13-year-old, like that's just not a
Yeah.
thing. And I was, I think, a lot more soulful and embodied and passionate and mature than really anybody I was dancing with in those genres, but that just wasn't what they were looking for. They didn't care about that. They didn't care about uniqueness. They didn't care about expressiveness. They cared about certain things, and I didn't really have those things. So
Right.
I'm not really blaming them. You go to ballet school, they're interested in the things that ballet is interested in, and that's not those things for the most part until you get
Yeah.
to the highest echelons of ballet. For a long time, it's just virtuosity and technique and flexibility and stamina, and then at the very, very highest levels, everybody can do 32 fouettes and everybody can do quadruple pirouettes and et cetera, et cetera. Then they're like, okay, now I want to see something really unique and special because now I want you to separate yourself from, how are you different from Suzanne Farrell and Gilsey Kirkland and Tyler Peck? And like, how are you different from these people? And now I want you to be you. But until then in ballet, I think it's much more like standardized. And I just wasn't a standardized kid. So
Yeah.
then I jumped to jazz, and really in New York, there aren't studios the way there are in like the suburbs where you have kids and teens.
Yeah.
There were like adult studios. And
Gotcha.
so I was just like going to this adult open class dance studio, like same place I teach now. I was taking class, and I was taking class mostly with like 20, 30-year-olds who were dancing for Janet Jackson and Madonna, and they were in the music videos. And, I'm dancing with, oh, he just recorded the music video for Vogue like last week. And that's also tells you how old I am. And that's what I want. That is where I found a home. They were all like, they mascotted me. They were like, this amazing, like, little 14-year-old, and she's so passionate and soulful and not in a weird way, like sexy, like it wasn't weird. It
Right.
wasn't creepy, but they were just like, and you've got all this energy and you're passionate and you're in your body and they just loved me. And I also was no threat, like, so any competitiveness that was generally in the room, I didn't get any of that because, like, I'm not competing with them. I'm not going to audition for Paula Abdul's video.
Right.
Not now, maybe in 5 years or 6 years, but they just thought I was amazing and I felt very cherished in that community.
Yeah.
They really like brought me up, and they, it was like having a bunch of like aunts and uncles, and it was just great. And then I was 17, graduated high school, and I felt like, yeah, my technique does not yet feel ready for me to go to those auditions for the jobs that I want. So I'm going to go to college and like pull my technique together. And then I'll come back and I'm totally going to be a jazz dancer and dance for Janet Jackson. But then I
Okay.
went away to college, and of course I got weird, as we all do, and and I came back total like weirdo modern dancer, and
Gotcha.
that became my life.
Did the thoughts of going off to college, did the did you have an instinct that you wanted to go out of state or stay in state?
I definitely wanted to get away from home,
Okay.
saying home in air quotes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I wanted to get away. I wanted to go to a place where they had a really solid academic experience and also a really highly rated dance department. So I didn't want to go to a conservatory where I was going to be a small fish and a lot of competitiveness. And again, feel like there was all this standardization that I wasn't meeting and matching. But I also
Right.
didn't want to go to a place that wasn't like intellectually stimulating and that I wasn't going to be around. I didn't want to be around only dancers or even only artists. I wanted to be around like scientists and engineers and artists and architects and writers and musicians, everybody. And I also didn't want to be like the big fish and like, oh, you're the good dancer. I wanted to have a place that felt both aspirational but also not super competitive.
Gotcha. Where did you choose to go?
I ended up at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Really? That's amazing because I'm just outside of Detroit.
Oh,
So you're in my home state, born and raised here, but all of my family's from East Tennessee. And my mom and dad came up here right after they got married because my dad was a mechanic. So with the auto industry here, it was real
yeah,
easy for him to find work, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, U of M has been a big part of
Yep.
Michigan life.
Yeah.
In terms of the environment around the school, with it also being a huge athletic university, did that feel more comfortable to you than what it was like being in Brooklyn in terms of that environment?
I,
Because U of M's got a little bit more of a towny feel to
yeah,
it.
I did like that.
Brooklyn is definitely city.
Yeah. Oh, I grew up in Queens. I live in Brooklyn now. I grew up in,
Queens, okay.
and it was, I mean, I grew up in like 80s New York, so it was pretty rough here.
Yeah, yeah,
And, while we can complain about some of the things that we lost and some of the like richness of that gritty old New York, and Giuliani Disneyfied it and made it all clean, clean.
yeah,
Um, there's, some really positive things that have happened in New York getting cleaned up. There are a bunch of things that people, old school New Yorkers, complain about, but in the big picture, it was very urban and fairly dangerous, and stuff happened. And I was always vigilant about stuff, no more stuff happening. And so it was lovely to be able to just bike around and walk around and be in Ann Arbor's a very cute little liberal bubble
yeah,
town. And I was fairly siloed in dance and English departments, which were also these little bubbles. And I literally never went to the stadium. I never went to a game once. I hated all the jock stuff and all the,
right.
like,
I get it.
it sucks. And
Yeah,
I just was never, I just could never get into it. Sports in general has never been a thing for me, although I can get into the anatomy and the kinesiology of a particular thing, or like the way a particular player might play and express themselves. I can
yeah,
get granularly interested in that, but like sports as a genre is just like has no hold over me.
sure.
So I just didn't relate, but it was a big enough place that I didn't need to, because there was always people to
Right.
relate to, and there were always, factions that I can turn to. And I really liked, as much as I've said I'm an introvert, like I had been alone so much, I really just liked feeling a hum of
Yeah.
people that felt safe-ish around me.
Once you got to college, were you able to suss out a couple of those closer friends that you kind of attached to?
Yeah, definitely. I had some really good friends in college, and we were, for the most part, all dancers, couple
Okay.
non-dancers, couple more English people, but for the
All
most
right.
part, dancers. And just this feeling that dancers often get with each other, that despite it being, a somewhat competitive profession,
Right.
dancers are just so there for each other. They're so familial. And I think the intimacy of being invested in body and touch and facial awareness and sharing a reality in terms of storytelling, it generates so much intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. How was the other classes for you in terms of the academics versus dance? Did you excel just as good in academics as you did in dance?
I think for the most part, I thrived. I didn't know at the time that I had a neurodivergent brain. So, in retrospect, like, could I have made things easier for myself? I could have. But it was a good balance for me. I was double majoring in dance and English. I always had, and this is kind of an ADHD thing, but okay, I'm going to say it in a bad way and then I'm going to change the story. The way that
Okay.
I grew up saying it was I have special skills at bullshitting. And what I really mean is, when I look back on it and I retell that story, I was highly intuitive. I was very perceptive. I had very quick pattern recognition. So I could have like not read the book and then go into my high school English class, and I'm listening a little bit to the conversation about like character agenda and what's happening in this story. And then I raise my hand and start talking about like why a character would have done this or that or the other thing. And the teacher's like, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so you really did a deep reading of that, and I would feel kind of ashamed that
Right.
I had lied, really. I'd been like making that up. And I grew up with a certain kind of shame around reading and this thing that I had termed like bullshit. I know how to
Yeah.
bullshit. And it was like later I recognized once I figured out some of my neurotype, oh, that wasn't bullshitting. First of all, that was amazing survivalism. And
Yeah.
second of all, that was actually like a set of superheroic skills that I was putting together in the moment. And I often, after that conversation in English class, would go read the book. Like I had a little bit of a itchiness about like, I'm not going to do what I'm told and I'm not going to read what they want. And part of my sort of nonconformity was like, I sometimes didn't want to do the thing that I was exactly the thing I was supposed to do, but then I would always read the book for fun later.
Okay.
The discussion in English class would be so interesting to me, I'd go read the book.
Right.
So, I was in a fairly similar space in college where I could get away with things in a way because I did have certain skills for articulating and writing and context clues and pattern recognition. But, think I was building a little bit of shame around my intelligence and academic prowess and work ethic. And then I was also building a lot of stamina and resilience around these skills that I had around the pattern recognition and the intuition and all of that. And I was like getting really good and found it very juicy
Yeah.
to use those skills. Like I enjoyed it and then I would feel shame. But then I would enjoy, like writing a paper and not really having enough, hadn't done an outline, hadn't done it, any of that. And I would just write off the seat of my pants and then get an A on the paper. And I'd be like, oh, I didn't do it the way they told me to do it. I'm bad. I'm a bad student. But
Right.
it was how I really enjoyed doing it. And only, in my 40s when I was diagnosed, then went back and thought, oh, how well you figured yourself out back then. You just didn't know it.
Right. Yeah, that's what I immediately saw when you started talking about it that way, was that it wasn't necessarily just bullshitting. You understood what the dynamic was of a character or a situation without having to read exactly what it was. It, what I it From my perspective, it's more of like a foresight ability to be able to pick that out of an explanation or the contextual explanation
Yeah.
rather than literally having to go through the experience.
Yeah, and it's what I have just recently been doing a bit more academic writing, which I had never done. I'd only done kind of trade writing, like writing for my community. And,
Okay.
I can write my voice and I can say what I say and I can use opinion. And it was suggested to me as these books are coming out, we should do a little bit more publishing in journals. And so I wrote a couple things and submitted. So I've been in this back and forth with academic journals. And the thing that keeps coming up is they're like, well, you have this idea, but you haven't cited anybody for that idea. And I'm like, yeah, I know, that was my idea. And they're like, well, that's been said. And so you need to cite the literature of people who've said that before you. And of course, I understand it in a certain sense. And of course, I'm all for like facts and critical thinking and verification and, all of that and
Sure.
scientific method. I'm not saying like just say whatever you want to say and people should believe you. I don't mean that. At the same time, some of these things that I'm saying, they're not things that need to be proven.
Yeah.
I can say, I'm saying something like getting artistic feedback in certain contexts can be create lifelong wounds for artists. Like artists can be
Oh, for sure.
deeply wounded by artistic feedback. So I'm positing something like that, and they're like, you have to make citations for that statement. And I
What?
just feel like, how am I not enough of an expert? I've been an artist
Right.
for 30 years. I've been coaching artists for 25 years. All my community are artists talking about their process and receiving feedback. Why do I need to go find somebody else that said the thing that I think and put it into the situation to validate my idea? And it ties into this thing of, like
Yeah.
the way that my brain works. And again, I'm not trying to get out of rigor. And, if I'm saying something that feels like, I want to know where you got that information from, definitely citation. And certainly if you're
Sure.
using somebody else's idea. But the idea of going to find somebody else who previously said something that I just felt and thought and said
Right.
in order to validate my opinion, or feeling about something or intuition, when that wasn't, I'm not citing it because that's a meaningful thing for me and I've always loved that piece of writing and I want to bring it into this article. I'm just like, oh, did anyone else ever think this? Let me bring it in so that you believe me. There's something about it that just like really rubs me the wrong way and I find grating.
Yeah. That rubs me the wrong way just by you expressing it and explaining it that way. Because I can remember being in college, my basic drawing class, the the instructor told my parents when they came to visit that I would never be more than a B student. And that was traumatic for me. That was a scar that got cut into me. And I thought, well, this is bullshit. If I'm only going to be a B student, then why am I paying all this money? And granted, I had to work and pay for pretty much all of my education myself at that point. Ultimately, couldn't continue because of those factors. But to have somebody say something like that, who is supposed to be the person who's trying to teach you the basic principles that you need for structure to move forward and expand your creativity, just from a drawing perspective. To say you're never going to be more than a B student, it immediately relegates you into a lower threshold of not being able to excel beyond where you're at.
Yeah.
And yeah, I that rubbed me the wrong way too.
Yeah.
Hearing
I
you describe it, that's disappointing.
Yeah, I had this really deep conversation with my 13-year-old a couple weeks ago, and he was saying, he was in a he was in a tender moment. I also have two very highly sensitive kids.
Okay.
So he was in a tender moment and something sad had happened to him, disappointing, and was like, how do you go on every day knowing like anything can happen tomorrow? Like the worst things can happen. And I said, oh, actually, that's what makes me go on is feeling like anything could happen tomorrow. Like,
Right.
I have no idea. And so I'm curious to live another day to see what might happen. And when somebody tells you what your future is and what your ceiling is, they've taken away that feeling of like, so yeah, we don't know. Let's see how things go. And for me, at least, that gives me this life force and momentum, propulsion to see what's going to happen. How's it going to turn out? It's a page turner. And when
Yeah.
someone's, oh, I've read the last page of your book, you're never going to get more than a B, or you're never going to be a dancer, or you're never going to, well, why read the book?
Yeah. Exactly. I can understand that sense and that feeling that your son was experiencing because I've had that many a time, many a thought, even to the point of feeling like I couldn't go any further and going ahead and attempting suicide, trying to take myself out of this existence. But one of the things that I can say is that too for me has always been a scenario of just a little glimmer of hope that something may be different tomorrow that'll change everything. And as much as for my journey, I got stuck in feeling like there wasn't ever going to be a change, there wasn't ever going to be something take place. Just that little glimmer thought at least allowed me get to the next day, and then a lot of times I would feel somewhat different and I could recognize that and then try to progress that further on. Other times it was like days and days of darkness and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, just having that as a creative, as a highly sensitive person, it's difficult in the world because you have so many things coming at you nowadays, even more so than it was when we were younger because of the internet. So children have so much exposure to what we didn't in terms of the world environment versus localized environments. So yeah, it's definitely difficult. But if creatives can get to a place of understanding about that, then hopefully that'll help them get to another day as well.
Yeah. And I do think that it can be useful, where I'm distracted by wanting to say I'm so sorry that you went through that. So I'm just pause to say that I think what can be useful also is there are these moments when something unexpected and wonderful happens, and it happens just in a moment. You turn a corner, you meet a person.
Yep.
I am lucky enough to be in a just magical romantic relationship now, after a divorce.
Uh,
And, I went on one date with him 8 years ago and never went on another first date again and never dealt with another bad ghosting experience. It was just like it just took one moment, one choice to say yes to one email or whatever, and
right.
then you see the sequence of events that follows. Went to one audition and but then got that job and danced with that company for 7 years, changed my whole life, and said yes to this or met that person. And when you've had a few of those experiences where what just happened? Everything like, and you don't even necessarily know it in the moment. It's not even necessarily like I won the lottery or I got into this big dance company. I didn't know on that first date that was going to change my life.
Sure.
Then turned out, and I'd been for years, this is awful and it's terrible and it's always going to be this way. And I don't have what it takes and I'm going to be alone forever. And then it takes one meeting, one moment, and that whole thing is gone. That whole angst is just gone.
Yeah,
And now I think it's gone forever. Even if we didn't work out, now I think I understand, oh, yeah, it could be any moment. And that's that feeling like, yeah, at any moment, something awful can happen. And it does around the world. Every moment of every day, something awful is happening.
for sure.
Every moment of every day, something magical is happening too.
Yeah,
And I don't know what the proportions are. And in a way, it doesn't matter because, you know, life is mathematical, but it's, I think, more poetic than mathematical. And so I feel like I'm either looking at the open door that's like something terrible could happen, or I'm looking at the open door like something magical could happen. And I sort of feel like you have to put your focus on one or the other. It's too distracting to like anxiety provoking to be trying to look between these two potential doors. So I'm like, well, I have to make a choice and I really have no data in either direction and I have no way to know and I don't really believe in any kind of, divine plan. So I'm going to look out that door
right.
and like look for the next wonderful thing. And some terrible thing will come through that door at some point, no doubt. Yeah, or multiple things. And I'll deal with them when they come.
Right.
For me, like looking out for the next wonderful thing, sometimes it's out that door and I have to actually like call out to it or go get it or whatever. Or
Yeah,
I could look out the terrible door and just be like, what do I have to avoid? What do I have to avoid? What are the pitfalls? And I may not be able to avoid them anyway. It just feels like that other door is a better outcome for me.
for sure. For sure. With getting farther along into college, did you have, you had mentioned too, in earlier on in elementary and junior high, high school, you had some teachers recognize your uniqueness in the writing component, English, I believe it was. Did you experience any of that in college from both sides, the dance and the educational?
My peers were always saw me as a dancer.
Okay.
adored and celebrated and appreciated me and thought I was amazing and thought our teachers were on crack for not appreciating me. I would say that for the most part, the core faculty of my dance department did not
Really? Okay.
appreciate it. It was still a fairly classical department. It's changed quite a bit since then, and I think they have much more progressive, forward-thinking people there now. But back then, no, they didn't. But there was always one guest artist that came in every year. We had a big show, do you know Power Center for the Arts, that big, huge opera house?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was like a 2,500 seat opera house, huge deal. And every year the dance department put on one weekend huge show on that big stage. And it was like the whole fall and half of the spring semester were all just geared up to Power Center, which was usually in like February. And we always had a guest artist come in, and they were really sort of the star of the show in a way. And then, the faculty would rotate making pieces. And with the exception of one faculty member, no, I was never in 4 years cast in a faculty piece. And every year, the guest artist would have their own audition. And I was always not only cast in that guest artist piece, but usually
Elevated.
like a lead person in that guest piece.
Yeah.
And usually that guest artist was like a working New York choreographer. So
Right.
I was like, okay, seems like the people who are actually doing this actually do like me. What's going on? And then I was always like passed around among the grad students who had to make work. They were, emerging choreographers, and my peers always wanted me in their dances. So I felt a lot of appreciation from my peers and those guest artists, not so much from the faculty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing when you see those things take place. And I've always looked at education from a skewed perspective. And I say that because I started off going to public school, and then going into fourth grade, my parents put me into a private Christian school. And I was devastated internally because I had already developed my friends, my little friend group. It wasn't a whole lot, but it was just enough. And also, too, was presented with an opportunity going into fourth grade to go into this program called Project Plus, which was a extracurricular artistic program. And half of the day we would go to the high school to be able to do these things. First half of the day was just at your elementary school. You did what your basic stuff was. But I didn't get any of that going into the private school. They didn't have any real formal art education influences there at all. To the point where it ended up that I was doing a lot of things artistically. Like, as it started off, it was like K through 12, all in the same school. So for the older students, they didn't really have like Letterman jackets or anything like that. And I designed this little monogram that became the letters on the Letterman jacket in like junior high. And so I've always looked at, in the same scenario as I was talking about going off to college, being having teachers that weren't really giving me accolades or telling me I was only going to be able to go to this level. I've always looked at education as being a stunting environment for me because it never allowed me to expand outside of what it was just putting forth. And I feel that a lot of times, especially highly sensitive creatives, we seem to get stuck in those environments to where that is the case, and it's difficult to navigate through.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate for you that you had those peers, you had those friends, you had those incoming creatives who were at the higher levels already that were saying, "Oh, yeah, I need to have her in this production. I need to have her in this piece." But yet the instructors weren't moving you in that direction.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing if you looked at the proportion of people who told me I'd never make it. And then the proportion of actual professional rejection, like how many auditions I went to that I didn't get the job, or how many things I wanted that never happened, it's much higher on the people that told me I wouldn't make it than on the not making it.
Yeah. As you're coming to the end of college and you're thinking about moving forward with this degree, this piece of paper that says you've accomplished something, what is your first instincts of thinking about what you want to do after you're exiting that stage in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, I joke about it, but it's really true. Don't feel like I ever really made any decisions about
Okay.
dance. It just was like that was an absolute inevitable. I was going to go back to New York and dance. And I didn't know what it would look like, and I didn't have any really big fantasies about, what level of quote unquote success I'd get to. I knew I needed to be dancing, so I went back home and got a waitressing job and took a bunch of classes and pretty immediately had a couple of small gigs from, somebody would see me in class or a grad student who'd been at U of M would move to New York, or I went to a little audition, and I just always had one or two dance jobs I was working on, and I was taking classes and I was waiting tables and I had some friends, and I was like, this is my career right now, and it felt great. I thought this is it.
Yeah.
And, little did I know I would audition for like a really big company and actually get in, and that would change my life quite a bit. But I thought I was doing it. That wasn't like a placeholder for me. So I don't really feel, sometimes people say, want to credit me with a certain kind of bravery that feels disingenuous for me to accept, because I don't really feel like I was that brave. I just felt like I had no choice. Like I had to dance. And I don't really feel like I was weighing the option, there's, not a lot of jobs and your body type is not really accepted. And just
Yeah.
seems very unlikely that this is going to go in a really, positive way for you. No, I'm going to do it anyway. I don't care. I wasn't like that. I was like, I don't know. Yeah, probably not. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, that's what
Yeah.
I'm doing. And
Right.
I don't really resonate with the idea that I made a brave choice, because it didn't feel like a choice to me.
Okay. Do are you able to see the resiliency within yourself?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, I am.
Because I'm seeing that from your story.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the resiliency was also a certain kind of just denial of the situation
Okay.
at the service of my wholeness, because I just felt like I really only feel like me when I'm dancing. So what am I going to do? Like go get a business degree, and like what am I doing? Like I don't know. I'm only me when I'm dancing. I have to dance, right? And
Yeah.
then if it becomes terrible and I'm not happy, I'll figure something else out, because something else will start to make me happy, I guess.
Yeah.
So I figured, well, I'll do this until it brings me more pain than joy, and then I'll figure out what's going to bring me more joy, and I'll do that. Including maybe I'll go back to school for something and become an English teacher or a psychologist, or who knows? I don't know. And then it never brought me more pain than joy.
The perspective of what your parents are thinking at that point in time, finishing school with a degree, and then coming back to New York and starting to move in the direction of what you're doing. Did your parents give you any kind of joyful congratulations with getting that degree?
There was definitely some celebration. I think college probably was more meaningful to my father, who was more of an academic.
Yeah.
But I think both of them, I mean, I remember they're divorced, so it was, separate things, but I do remember there being some kind of celebration from both of them. And then, like, in a lot of ways, again, sort of being left to my devices, and I was just very independent and kind of forged ahead myself.
Gotcha. Okay. Again, resiliency. The From my perspective, I know New York, especially the five boroughs, they have quite a bit of cultural richness that is there and in place. And I've recognized that from afar my entire life just because of music, the dance, breakdancing movies that came out, the Warriors movie that came out, me experiencing New York from afar and what those boroughs looked like. The music culture within that area, did that have a lot of influence in terms of the way that you wanted to approach dance in any way?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that I've ever like put any of those pieces together, but I do have a strong recollection of like DJs and independent music artists would be on the subway and they'd like play their track and they'd like hand out demos or they'd, want you to buy their demo from them for $1 or something. And I think there is something about that go-getterness and make your own path that I think became some part of a story in my head. I don't know if and I was certainly entrenched in music because of dance, but I don't know that like the actual music culture had such like a literal one-to-one effect, but I feel like I watched music artists like bust through walls and make their way and like create their own destiny and stuff. And I think something of that was infectious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When you're doing the waitressing and taking the classes and doing some of the dance things that you're doing, at what point did you get into an opportunity where you felt it was extremely gratifying in terms of, oh wow, this is what I've been waiting for?
Joining that dance company. Sorry, I
Okay.
was okay, making sure that my partner was okay with this too. Joining that in dance, professional dance, there aren't the same kind of equilateral steps as in a lot
Right.
of careers. Like, I think even and certainly every career has the like, you hit it big moment, right? You can just like, you suddenly got a New York Times bestseller on your hand or something like that that you didn't expect. So it can happen in every profession, but I think most arts fields have more of a like equilateral set of steps. But in dance, you're like, small companies that mostly don't really pay you, or you get paid, $100 for a weekend of performances kind of thing, or like you're a full-time dancer in a major dance company. And there wasn't, at the time at least, a lot of space in between. Now I think there are more mid-level companies, mostly because nobody makes it to that top level anymore. It doesn't really exist because we just don't have the kind of like sponsorship and patronage for the arts that we had in the 80s.
Yeah.
So there are still those top companies, but we don't really get new ones anymore. So all what used to be the top companies are now like the middle companies. So now there is more of a stepping stone. But back when I was auditioning, you were sort of like what people would look at you more like a hobbyist. And then suddenly you were like a major professional dancer. And that's what happened to me. So in a way, I wasn't ready for it.
Okay.
And I didn't have quite that utopian, like, Mary Tyler Moore moment. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I made it and throw my hat in the air and like everything's gonna be okay. I was like, this is crazy. I am not meant to do this and I'm gonna get fired and like, so I'm gonna be found out. And what just happened? And I was 23 and underexperienced professionally and suddenly just like touring with this major dance company on these major stages and big papers writing about me and writing about my body, and it just felt very exposed and scary, and I felt I had a lot of imposter syndrome. So it wasn't quite the glorious success experience that I might have thought it would be.
Okay. And one of the reasons why that I wanted to have you on is because of your experience, and also to because of your experience that I was looking at on websites and stuff like that that were talking about you. And one of the things that I think is very fascinating, but also a point of being able to encourage others that are out there who are trying to go into dance or a creative field where they may not always look the part of what that mold would be versus the creative flow that is moving through you that allows you to get into those opportunities and excel in those opportunities. And I think it's a huge example that you have the ability to share that others can say, hey, this is somebody that did it differently, and so I can do it differently. With getting into that dance company and having these quote unquote critics out here writing about you, and they're saying, well, you don't look like what we've seen and what we're used to, and feeling that sense of, oh wow, I may be an imposter here doing this thing. What was the thing up here in your mind that was like, no, I'm doing this and I know how to do this? Was there that
Yeah,
component in play?
yeah, but it wasn't in my mind, it was in my body because it was the feeling that I had in rehearsal and on stage when I was dancing, where I was like, no, I got this. I mean, I know this. This is true. This is right. This is real. And I would have this feeling on stage, all these people out there in the dark looking at me, and I could feel or I believed I could feel what they could see. And it was very truthful. It
Yeah.
wasn't any kind of imposter. It was in the social things and the structure and the dance criticism and the institutions. That's the place where I felt the imposterness. But on stage and in the studio, I didn't feel that way.
Okay. Okay. And so the rationale of the mind for you was more so, I know internally that I'm in the right space versus listening to the externals.
I think if I could convey one thing that feels like my most important lesson around this whole thing, it's the importance of being able to hold contradiction in the body.
Yeah.
And I feel like they were both true. I felt like an imposter and I felt exposed and I felt vulnerable. And I also felt right and grounded and amazing. I'm amazing.
Yeah.
And my experience with people throughout that era, and eventually I just decided I'm not talking about my body to the press anymore. Like people kept wanting to, I want to write an article and I want to,
Sure.
and in the
Sure.
beginning I was like, well, I mean, like Dance Magazine wants to write an article about you. Of course you say yes, that's a huge thing. But I kept being so hurt by the articles that I finally just said, yeah, okay, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not interested. I don't care about, this is not my issue and I don't care about it. And I don't want to be a poster child for anything. I don't want to be a role model. If I am, that's fine. I'm not trying to be an anti-role model, but it's not what I'm trying to do. That's not where I want to put my energy. I don't care about my size. And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to like break through the glass ceiling and make place for other people. And I'm just trying to dance. And so I just want to concentrate on my art and on dancing. And you all can talk till you're blue in the face about what you want to talk about. I'm not interested in talking about it. If you want to
Yeah.
talk to me about art, I'll talk to you about art. I'm not interested in talking to you about my body. So eventually I got to that place. But until I got to that place, I lived with a lot of contradiction because people really wanted me to be that role model. And oh, they would project all these things. You're so confident. You're so, I don't know, you just, you don't care. And they would project all these feelings and thoughts and reasonings onto me that were for the most part entirely not true. It was like, oh, it's so beautiful to see this woman who's just like so just loves her body and is so, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? No, I do not. You don't tell me how I feel. That's not how I feel. I get that that's how you want me to feel because it's how you want to feel. And you
Right.
believe I feel that way so that you can model yourself after me. I don't feel that way. I feel plenty of shame, plenty of insecurity. I don't wish this is not my ideal body. I feel less than plenty of times. I also feel beautiful and amazing and super powerful when I dance. I feel like I have exactly what I need to give on stage. I feel like I'm captivating and have the ability to make magic. And I also feel really small and shitty and ashamed. And that's just all true. And nobody wanted to live with me in that contradiction. Nobody wanted to make space for me to be both things. And it's the lack of acceptance of contradiction that I think does the most damage. Like,
Yes.
more than people judging me, more than people wanting this or that from me, it was the fact that they were like, no, you have to be so confident. You're so confident. You're so this, you're so that. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I have to be, but I don't feel like those. So these feelings are bad. Then I have to, they want me this way, and it was just another version of, what we're talking about in school, et cetera, of like, I've got a standardization for you.
Yep.
If you're going to break through the mold and you're going to be outside the box, you're a warrior and you're a superhero and you're so confident and you don't care what people think. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I totally care what people think. I feel really shitty when people judge me. I've cried pretty much every article that came out where they said something about my body. I am not this thing that you think I am, and I don't want to be. And you're again not seeing the real me, which is complex. And we're all like that. We
Yeah.
all have that complexity. And so many situations in life, I just feel like everybody wants to erase, whitewash your complexity. Usually the parts that are more challenging, like when I folded my dance company as a company because I moved to transition to choreographing for theater, I felt some grief. And I was expressing that to somebody, a friend, and they were like, oh, but you've done this and you've done that. And I was like, I know. That doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I feel some grief and I feel
Yeah.
some sense of failure. Like I feel like I'm folding this dance company and it never really got to the height that I was hoping it would get. Oh, but this, and this happened. I'm like, I know. And I'm proud of those things and I'm sad about these things at the same time. Why can't I be both those things? And just people really just want to put you in this, and it sort of feeds into this thing that I just laugh at when, oh, I don't know, you're complaining about something that's lacking or went wrong, and people, oh, if it makes you feel any better, I missed my train and I missed that, da da da. I'm like, why would it make me feel better that you suffered? Because there's just this set of comparisons and like mathematical equations about happiness and success, both within our own lives. Like, oh, you can't be feeling insecure if you're going to be this role model for people, who've like dancing with an atypical body type. You can't
Right.
have any of those feelings that I would call negative feelings. You have to feel only these things. Or you can't feel both failure and success at the same time. You can't feel both pride and regret at the same time. And you can't feel grief and relief at
Yeah.
the same time, which anyone who's lost somebody who they have a complex relationship has felt both grief and relief
Yep.
and guilt
Yep.
and shame because we're not supposed to feel relief or we're a terrible person if we feel relief at somebody passing, even if that person was an abuser or was toxic or stole from our life. We can also feel grief at our abuser passing because there are things attached to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the, and I picked a key word out of what you just said, and it was the magic. That is the magic of everything that you just explained and expressed is the fact that the complexity as a whole is the thing that brings forth beauty. Because if you don't have that, you don't really have a whole lot of flavor.
Yeah. If we think about spatial harmonics, and what I mean is like there are three dimensions, right? You've got your up, down, your forward, back, and your side, side.
Yep.
And together, those three dimensions, of course, create three-dimensional space, which is volume, which is us, right?
Yep.
We are three-dimensional. When you think about something that's just one-dimensional, whether it's a color, primary color, or, one note, not a harmonic, that lack of complexity also generally leads to a lack of depth, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that like a stroke of red in a painting, that one single primary color, or like, just looking upward can't be a profound moment. Of course it can, but it's within the context of our three-dimensionality. And our feelings are dimensional. We have our highs and we lows. We have our, future and our past. We have this field of others that is our horizontal plane. And all of that creates the complexity of the human experience. And I think that's the only place we're going to really feel the velocity of magic is in
Right.
our, like, the fullness of our humanity.
Yeah, exactly. Is you're getting more established in your career and moving through it and then having your own dance company that you've created for your own business opportunities. When did the opportunities start to come where other institutions were looking at you and saying, hey, we would like for you to come over here and share some things within our environment? What
Well,
was one of the first instances of that?
yeah, it kind of feeds into this whole imposter and complexity conversation because the very first big opportunity I got that was institutional was because I was in this big dance company. So
Okay.
a big studio said, "Oh, come and teach class." And I was 23, I was not a teacher. I had no following, I had no audience. I really did not know what I was doing, and I shouldn't really have gotten that class. There were a lot better teachers than me in New York. But I had this big company name, and that company was even like about to have an audition. So people wanted to be anywhere in the vicinity of anybody in the company that might possibly help them. And these auditions, like my audition, there were 425 women there. So these auditions got a lot of people there. And Bill was just about to have an audition. This big dance studio, one of the biggest dance studios in New York, said, come and teach for 3 weeks before that audition. And my classes were packed. And it was not because of me. It was like situational. It was like a total
Okay.
privilege situation. You
Gotcha.
got that because of some privilege. So that was one of the first ones. So I think it actually sort of set me up to not really take them to heart. And I think it's also maybe part of some larger ethos of perspective for me where, and I'm partly, I think, a neurodiverse thing where I feel like as soon as something happens, it's already metabolized. It's already, like I get some up and I'm like, oh, I got that show. Okay, now I'm doing this show. And it's just like the work of the show, and I'm not thinking about like, whoa, this is your first off Broadway show, this is a big deal, like, are you taking this in? No, I am not taking it in.
Right. Right.
I'm on the ground floor doing the work, and and then opening night, and yeah, there's maybe a moment when it's exciting and you're getting dressed up, but for the most part I'm like, is he going to make that cue? Are they going to enter at the right time? Is that going to be are they going to remember the change I made? I'm just looking at the show, the work, the show. And then afterwards, like I've always had trouble really receiving and ingesting compliments. So after shows have never been a time when I really could receive at the level that might have been, more like porous.
Yeah.
If people are talking to me about how great this and how great that, and I'm like, uh-huh. and I'm masking and putting on a nice smiley face and
Right.
trying to make them feel like I've received the thing that they've said and that they were meaningful and they got heard. But I wasn't really hearing much of anything that got said to me. And I think in a lot of ways there's always something to go for as an artist. There's always a theater you want to be at or a grant you want to get or tour you want to get, and you're always not getting those things because there are so many of them. And so getting this one or that one always felt like, yeah, I mean, I guess whatever, sure.
Right.
And yeah, it's interesting in a field that's quite dominated by like the names of things and reputation of things. It never really struck me, or I never really took it to heart getting one of those things.
Yeah.
I just like didn't feel that different to choreograph a show at Lincoln Center or to choreograph a show at this little, dinky studio here, or I taught at Princeton for a while. I didn't really feel that different. And the, student population is different, commute is different. But in terms of like what I was trying to produce and create and how I was trying to relate, it didn't really feel different from teaching at the New School or Long Island University or, anywhere else that I taught. And I get itchy about how excited people get about the names of things.
Sure.
So it was never, if people would say, "Oh, you danced with Bill T. Jones," or "Oh, you teach at Princeton," or "Oh," da, da, da," I was always like, "Yeah, is that what you're into?" Because I don't really resonate with that. I don't feel seen.
Right.
When people are excited about the names of things, I don't feel seen particularly because I don't know. It's complicated and I don't feel like I've really like broken it down all that much. All I know is that I really love it when I can elevate beyond needing a particular name for something. So
Yeah.
like for a little while when I was choreographing after I left Bill's name opened doors for me and it was useful and I used it and people still were like, "Oh, I want to come to your class. I remember you from Bill T. Jones. I remember seeing you dance. You were blah 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 blah." So I used that, and then I had a company for a while and so that helped me with this and then I had that and that helped me with this, but I was always really happy. Like I remember somebody coming up to me, a student coming up to me after a dance class that I had taught, and there was like a third person there, and they said something about me having danced with Bill, and then the student who'd been a student for a little while was like, "You danced with Bill T. Jones?" And I was like, "Isn't that why you're here?" Kind of feeling, like, isn't that why everyone's here? Isn't that my
Card.
yeah,
Yeah.
my asset?
Yeah.
And she was like, "No, you're just such a good teacher." And I was like, I don't need Bill for validity. It's, sort of what makes this whole academic citation thing feel a little gnarly to me is like, I don't really want some other institution to be necessary for my credibility or validity.
For
So I
sure.
think in some way, like getting this or that thing that other people might think is impressive has always been a bit of a mixed bag for me because of course it's great. I'm not denying that these things have been really useful and I feel really grateful for all the places that have had faith in hiring me, and I do feel supported and acknowledged professionally by a lot of different places. So I'm not saying I'm not grateful for it, but I also don't like that people require so much of that for your credibility. So I think sometimes when I get them, I'm like, okay, I'll go teach at Princeton. That's sure. But I'm not like, hey, everybody, look, did you see? Because that doesn't really feel like truthful. That's not what I'm proud of.
Yeah. I get it. I've never been one to really want to throw out all the things that I've done or had the opportunity to do, or the people that I've been connected to as the the resume component. Like I've always had a hard time of putting a resume together for certain things because it's like what somebody else thinks is fantastic or phenomenal was just an everyday situation for me.
Yeah.
And it
And
just
also,
felt like a creative process.
yeah, and also like once you're in those situations, you oh, there are also people teaching at this institution that I don't actually think are like the most amazing teachers.
For sure.
Are people who have gotten this grant or that thing, that I don't necessarily feel like the thing itself is infallibly, choosing people. So, like you can be impressed by that name, but I don't necessarily think the name is so infallible. And I don't think it says anything in particular about me. And I would much rather have somebody talk about like the quality of my attention when I'm teaching than be impressed at a certain institution I taught at.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes absolute sense to me. I get it. And even in doing an interview or conversation like this as a podcast, I give these introductions just to highlight certain things over the guest's career. But I believe where really the highlights come out is within the conversation. Those little pieces of magic,
Yeah.
like you said, that come about just because of what's coming out of them at that point in time, or what the conversation is laying out, or just even the direction that it goes into.
Yeah.
Um,
And we can't pretend that we're not in the society that we're in, where those things are important to people and they do validate for people and people do contextualize you. And yes, then you can speak and you can reframe and recontextualize, but we can't pretend that we're not living in a society where people want to locate you
yeah,
as they think that they understand something about you by locating you and positioning you in a certain way. And some of it may be true, some of it may not be. It's not my favorite part of our society, but yeah, without that introduction, people are like, I just don't know what I'm listening to. I can't picture it. I don't know, I don't know how if she's going to say something like totally wackadoodle. And I feel like people still need that grounding,
yeah,
even if it's not my favorite.
for sure, for sure. I totally get it. And that, too, from my perspective as the host, I've always felt uncomfortable when I'm listening to something and the host or the person who's doing the interview asks the guest to explain what they do.
Mhm.
And I'm like, why do you do that? I know for me, it's like, I can do this, or these, or I can say the, like, how do you want me to answer this? I've done so many different things.
Yeah.
So that's where I've tried to alleviate some of that pressure with what I'm doing by going ahead and doing some research,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
get some things out, because I know what that's like on the other side to have to try and say these things.
You know
It's
what
horrible.
I feel like would be an interesting place to do an intro is if the host listed some things. Okay, you have been a professional dancer, a choreographer for dance, choreographer for theater, you're a writer, teacher, a mother, and a somatic therapist. That's a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
What is the fabric, the through line, the value that you feel is inherent in all of those things? That's where I would love to enter the biographical conversation.
So would you be comfortable stepping into that right now?
Sure. I You mentioned being highly sensitive and I added deeply feeling. I've always been that way. The world has always I've always felt myself and felt the world at a highly sensitized, attuned level. So I feel a lot. And it's gotten only more over time, both
Yep.
through, studying and scientific methods and somatics, but also like trust and faith in myself and my intuition, a little bit of work with psychedelics, like all of it over time and working with other artists and other bodies and then studying this form of movement analysis. But all of it all together has created this system in which I have like kind of an insane amount of feeling in my system. And when I look around the world, I see a lot of fracture between bodies and feelings, minds and feelings, minds and bodies, and a lot of people that have not been encouraged to be themselves. And so I think that there's something about authentic feeling and getting in touch with your own feeling and your own voice that feels like it's underneath everything I do. Certainly, like I do this with private clients, but essentially that's what I'm doing when I'm working on a play. I'm like, let's feel into this character, but also we're going to need you to be able to like prune some of your anxiety or your bias or your things that you're meeting the character with. Like, let's see how grounded and neutral we can get you as an actor, and then let's get into this character and let's like put them in your body and have some sensations around this character. It's like that with a character. It's like that certainly when I'm making a dance, but parenting feels like that. Writing my book felt like that. I'm like, I'm talking to these artists that I'm never going to meet, or most of them I'm never going to meet. They're just in their bedroom reading my book. What can I say that's going to like invite things to bubble up in them that they haven't met before? How am I going to help them map their own terrain just through this writing? And so I feel like everything that I do is about helping people to feel.
Yeah. And how does dance allow you to be able to conduct those types of things?
Well, that's the total playground for it. I mean, I never feel anything more than when I'm dancing. I can feel every shift, the weight shift, the flow, the gravity, the kinetic chains. I feel the passage of time. I feel the space that I am in. I feel the relationships to both things and people and myself and my past. And like it's all present when I'm dancing. And then all of those ideas are present when I'm watching other people move. So then I can engage with their landscape through their body and movement and support their journey in that way.
Right. With all of the students that you've worked with over the years, both as a company and also doing private mentoring and working with individuals as well, is it something that you can pick up rather quickly? I'm guessing that it probably is, but I'm just asking for the audience. Are you able to pick up certain elements of what might be going on in an individual based on the way they're expressing through a dance maneuver?
I can do it based on the way they walk
Okay.
or the way they sit and stand or carry their backpack. Yeah, if I had a dance, that's almost too much information. Yeah, I can make up and I call it I make up things because that's what we're doing. Everybody who's having any idea about any other human being is making it up. Now
Okay.
you may be making it up based on a ton of like really data-driven material, and you may very well be right if there is such a thing as like being right. Because that person has a reality of their experience, their lived experience. You have a reality of your observational experience. Whose whose reality is there's no one reality. Like both of those realities exist. That's just like one of those contradictions that we need to learn to live with. And that's another place where I think we don't live well together is you're like, no, my felt experience, that's the reality. Your experience of me is not a reality. It's a guess or it's a fiction or it's something you make up. But of course, my experience of you is an experience.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm saying you feel a certain way, you have certain agendas, you're thinking about a certain thing, that's something I'm making up. And that's where we need to be careful with each other. Now, can I make things up? And when I reflect them back to the person's, yes, that is exactly it. Yeah, sometimes. And that is based on body language and posture and gesture and lots of things that are data driven.
Yeah.
They're not infallible. So you'll hear things about body language like, oh, if a person's got crossed arms, that means they're closed off. And it can mean that. There's certainly like the heart is here, the viscera are here. breasts, we're covering them up and making a cross as a symbol that there's a no-fly zone.
Right.
However, people are also cold. People are recovering from shoulder injuries and like, crossing their arm takes the weight off their deltoid. People are, I don't know. There are other reasons why somebody might do that other than being closed off. And there's also like a bias around being closed off, right? So for me, there's no body action, there's no trait, there's no quality, no feeling that has any particular value, including that person behaves with cruelty, that person is intolerant. There's no value system for me in any particular feeling or behavior until I have a goal or they have a goal. Once there's a goal, then things have more or less value. So, like, it sounds weird. Stick with me for one moment in this, and I'll say, I could treat my kids cruelly. I could be abusive. I could yell all the time, do terrible things. I shouldn't say terrible in this example, do abusive things, violent things. Or I could be like nurturing and kind and loving and sympathetic and empathetic and loyal. And unto themselves, in this scenario, neither of those is good or bad. Until I come into the story and I say, I want my kids to feel safe and loved and supported, and I want them to grow up with a strong sense of self and feel grounded and valuable. Oh, well, then doing this kind of parenting's not going to work very well, and doing this kind of parenting is probably going to work really well. So I'm going to value this. But on its own, even like kindness and cruelty don't have value. Like if we look at nature and the animal kingdom, we ascribe a lot of value to like, oh, that's so cruel that the lion like grabbed that gazelle by the neck and took it down in front of its child.
Yeah.
It's not cruel.
Yeah.
And it had a goal, and taking that gazelle down fit its goal,
Yeah.
right? And so that's where our personal values come in. And so when I'm watching somebody move, I want to be sure that I'm not ascribing value. I'm just observing and noticing patterns. And I can notice like that person doesn't seem to want to walk from their heel to their toe. When they're walking, they're not striking their heel and then rolling on their foot to their toe. They're striking with their toe and rolling back to the heel. There can be a lot of reasons why they do that. But what they are doing is walking backwards while they're trying to walk forwards. So that is,
Ah, yeah.
it's notable to me. Like what they're doing with their body is a backwards walk, and they're pushing themselves forward while really trying to walk backwards. And so I'm just noticing there's contradiction in there. That's interesting. What are you feeling? Why might that be happening? Let's try on what would it feel like to walk heel to toe? What does that bring up for you? So then it becomes just a conversation about their experience and their feeling. And so I'm not coming in saying, "Oh, you're da 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 da. That means that you're da 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 da." Like, no, that's not my job. I'm not here to tell you who you are.
Right.
But I might have noticed something that you didn't notice yourself, and it's quite an interesting little mystery about you. I wonder what's in that. Let's break it down. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about your feeling. Let's try on the opposite feeling. Let's see what you get there. And that just allows us to bring attention to things that we didn't see before.
Yeah. Definitely. Those are very intriguing observations as well, because as you just described, the way that someone's walking is literally them moving in a backward motion rather than traditional forward motion, which can then explain, or not necessarily explain, but it can at least point out that wait, there's that contradiction, as you said, that's taking place. What can we do to either provide an opportunity for you to address that contradiction, or can we help you rework some movement to allow you to step into the natural
And
flow?
even yeah, and even before that, I would say there's a step before that that feels really important that I do think quite a few somatic practitioners skip, which is, what's your body saying? What's your body trying to tell you with that backward walk? Let's just listen
Right.
to it, not try to fix it, not try to anything. Let's just, oh, that's interesting. That's not what I would expect. So let's ask your body what's happening there. Is it feeling tentative? As a toe to heel walk. So if you just like start walking toe to heel and you don't try to push yourself forward, you'll start moving backwards. Like the wheels on your car are moving backwards in reverse.
Yeah.
And but we can override that. So we can walk forward, but with this toe walk, sort of like tiptoeing, right?
Yeah.
That's not the way your body is built, as a mechanical structure, not the physics of your skeleton and your momentum and your velocity. So what's going on? Something is outside the expectation of how a body moves, and that's a clue. So let's follow it. Let's tug on it a little bit and see what the body is trying to tell us, because it's always got something to say. We generally are not making time to listen to it.
Yeah.
I think the body generally has the absolute most critical, essential, fundamental information that we're going to receive from any plane of reality.
Yeah.
And yet it's the thing we generally listen to the least until it's in crisis. And then suddenly we're like, oh, my body's in crisis. I have to listen to my body. Your body could have told you things every day of your life on your way to that crisis and probably potentially avoided that crisis. I'm saying this as somebody who's had plenty of body crises. So I'm not saying this from any kind of superior position. I have done this just as much as everybody else, not listened to my body.
Yeah. Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. You're familiar with the book The Body Keeps the Score? Yeah, that's a huge thing that I think a lot of people do not take into consideration is the fact that the body will tell you when it gets to a point of I've had enough, can't take anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to start acting against you.
And if we learn how to listen, it tells us before we get to that point so that we can have an actual compassionate, empathetic relationship with all the parts of ourselves.
Right.
And we wait until the toddler's having the breakdown in the grocery store before we start talking to the toddler and asking them what they need, instead of along the way negotiating and listening and sometimes adapting our goals for the needs of maybe somebody who's got a little bit less regulation. And there are parts inside of us that have that toddler energy.
Yes.
And when we're not in a relationship and a negotiation, and we're not allowing ourselves to adapt to the different needs of our different parts, we are going to push them into crisis and then they will take over, and then we do have the stomach flu or a broken leg or a mental breakdown or whatever it is, whatever version our body takes us in. And I think we get a lot of physical things for a lot of different reasons. I'm not somebody who's like, oh, everybody that has cancer is because you have repressed emotions and you didn't deal with them. Because I
Right.
think that gets into a certain kind of blame and shame that I definitely do not ascribe to. But I do think that it's all connected, and our body will take what it needs eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a great place for us to be able to close out today. And one of the things that I always want to remind the audience at the end of each one of these episodes is to listen to your heart, but also be kind to your mind.